What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 73. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another movie discussion where we talk about a new film, give you my pros and cons, tell you my opinions overall about the film, my favorite scenes, and then really dive into whether I think this film is timeless. Is it something that I would rewatch over and over again? On this week's episode, we're actually not going to cover a film that came out in theaters. It's actually going to be a new film that came out through Netflix, and that is Hitman, starring Glenn Powell. This is the year of Glenn Powell. He's coming out in films like Twister, Anyone But You, and now this film in Hitman. I really didn't have any expectations in regards to this film. I only saw a couple of trailers here and there, and then I started hearing some good things, and so I was like, you know what? Let's go ahead and give it a shot. So let's go ahead and dive in, kind of cover my overall thoughts after I've got to check out the movie, and then we'll kind of go sprinkle in a little bit more about my pros and cons and other things that I thought about this film. Overall, I thought this film was very entertaining. Like I mentioned before, I had only seen a couple of bits here and there, not full trailers, so I didn't really know what to expect. And then I just heard a lot of different types of other review channels saying that this film was actually really good. It got a great Rotten Tomato score. So I thought, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And this film delivered. It feels like it's a mix of a lot of different things. It feels like it's a mix of like romantic comedy with a little bit of drama, also a little murder mystery, and it's all kind of bundled up into one movie. Now, in most cases, when you have so many different genres trying to kind of blend in together, it could sometimes be a disaster, right? The audience might get confused. They don't really know which way this film is kind of going. But on the other hand, for Hitman, it didn't feel like that at all. It actually felt like it was very smooth, at least in my opinion, after I watched it. There's moments where we highlight the main character, Gary Johnson. He is a professor in college teaching psychology, but he also has a part-time job with the New Orleans Police Department. And you kind of go through his understanding and the complexity of one's identity. And so that's what he kind of talks throughout the film. He narrates. He also does that during his class. And it just ends up jumping to these hilarious moments where he is basically trying to pretend to be a hitman. And again, forming that identity of a hitman. And so it's really fun stuff because you get to see him kind of just dress as different people. He goes into the mind of the person that he's trying to, eventually catch from doing a murder. And again, he's just trying to understand, okay, what should I be portraying as this character? And so it was just funny stuff, really good balance on those sides. And then you have the interactions between Madison and Gary. Madison is actually played by actress Adria Arjona. And whenever Madison and Gary are on screen, you could just feel the chemistry between the two. They have some hilarious and funny scenes as they start getting to know each other, start kind of getting to know a little bit more about their lives. And again, that's what I kind of called back a little bit before. There's a lot of good balances in this film. The balance between, again, the identity piece of it, the balance between the murder mystery of what's going on, and then you eventually have the romantic side of it between Madison and Gary. So all that just kind of combines into a really fun and entertaining film. I really enjoyed it. Just a lot of things that are obviously going on, but it was able to actually maintain and not go too wacky, too wild into any one of the genres. But again, overall, I had a really fun time watching this movie. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the pros that I had about Hitman. First one is got to be the entire operation that the New Orleans Police Department was pulling out in this film. Like I mentioned, what they're doing in this film is sort of like a sting operation where they're trying to catch people that want to actually murder their loved ones. So again, they're not actually doing anything yet. It's just the idea of, hey, I'm just so frustrated about my relationship. I want to get out of this. And so I want to basically murder my husband, my wife, whatever it might be. So this New Orleans department is basically trying to catch these folks, basically confessing, hey, I want to get rid of this person. And so what they do is that they actually get Gary, who again understands psychology. He ends up having to be put in a position to become a fake hitman, and he gets a confession out of these people, and they end up getting sent to jail. I really like that aspect. I really like that whole type of side of like showing, again, trying to catch people with these actions, even though, again, they're not really doing anything. They haven't done anything. It's just the intent, the thought of, hey, I want to do some harm to somebody else. But what I love most about this, and not just highlighting the sting operation, I also really love that after these people get caught, they actually show their court cases afterwards. And Gary is there in the stands. And they actually see him like that, throw him some dirty looks. But they're also showing that the defense is actually saying, hey, how could you put people in these kind of positions like that where you're making them confess to something that they actually haven't done? And it's actually very slimy, very dirty to do that to somebody, again, that's being caught off guard. And so again, it just kind of throws you a different perspective. Although again, there's still intent of harm in some way, but it actually just, again, that lawyer type of a perspective, it gives you both sides. Yes, we're following the main character, Gary, and he's trying to catch these bad people. But on the other side, their lawyers are trying to protect them, right? And kind of saying, hey, it's not fair that we're being spied on. It's not fair that they're actually trying to catch us doing something, again, that we haven't done ourselves. We're not going out there to kill somebody. We're hiring somebody else to do it. So again, it's just funny the perspectives that they showed, but I enjoyed that whole aspect and plot of the sting operation and the court cases that would go through it. Really like that. All right, I'm going to move on to my next pro, and it's actually something that I called out in my overall thoughts, is the chemistry of Madison and Gary. Again, this is one of my biggest pros of the film. Before coming into this movie, if I had to choose a couple that was really the best chemistry I've seen on screen this year, I would have to give it to Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling in The Fall Guy. They were really great together. It felt so real and so natural. But after watching The Hitman, my new number one couple here, from chemistry perspective, is Madison and Gary. This just incredible. Every time they were on scene, Adriana Arjona and Glenn Powell, they killed it. They just understood the assignment of like showing like, hey, these two people that are in just very different situations eventually kind of intertwine their stories and what they're going through and eventually fall in love in some type of way. But everything felt very organic, very real. Nothing was very forced in any type of way in their scenes. And again, you would believe that these people liked each other. And what they were doing in the relationship was very passionate. Again, what they go through in their story is very crazy, and how it ends up is something that you probably wouldn't expect. But that's actually what makes this film so unique. So again, their chemistry, Madison and Gary, was just top notch, and it actually made me enjoy the film very much. Last pro that I want to cover is really the discussion of identity overall. Like I mentioned before, Glenn Powell plays his character Gary Johnson, who is a professor in psychology. And again, he works for the Department of New Orleans. As he's going through the development of becoming a hitman and how he tries to pretend and act the part, what he's really doing is explaining, and what I love about this is that it actually goes back and forth. It goes sometimes to his classroom, and then it flips over to him basically turning into a different type of a hitman. And what he's doing is, and he's explaining, is that no matter how old somebody is, even though they've grown up with this type of self-identity, people think that I can't change, when in reality, you actually can change. If you're passionate enough, if you're really trying to strive to be something else that you really want to be, or what other people might envision you being, you can definitely do that. And he explains that even at the age of 40 or older, people are still finding ways to change little details of their identity to become, again, a better person, or better, again, family member, better husband, whatever it might be. And again, that whole aspect of the psychology piece of it really kept me engaged. And again, it just shows that, in real life, really, if you want to become a better person, it's not just going to come naturally, right? You got to learn different patterns that are occurring. You have to understand what is going to make sense, and what, again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, but you can actually, if you're passionate about it and you really say, hey, I really want to be this type of a person, right? A good person, a passionate or kind person, you can do that. And so that whole concept, again, of Gary explaining to his students, but then also showing in action of how you can really transform into a different person just by having these different types of traits, was really cool to see as the film played out. All right, now moving into my cons, not too many that I have here on this film. The only thing I could probably call out is that as I was watching it, again, through Netflix, the audio was very low sometimes on the dialogue piece of it. So there was times where Glenn Powell or Adria would kind of say something as their characters, and I couldn't really hear what they were saying, or sometimes it was very quick, and it was a very, witty joke, but I just couldn't keep up with it. So that's probably really the only thing that's maybe on my side. I had the TV really loud, but I didn't really catch a lot of the different types of lines that they were saying in their dialogue. Other than that, I don't really have much to complain about this movie. It was, again, very fun for me. I enjoyed it. Not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, there's probably going to things that if I rewatch it, that might kind of catch my eyes, like, oh, okay, well, this might not be as funny. Well, I guess I can call that out. The film did make me laugh and chuckle a couple of times because of the mix of different genres. It couldn't go all the way comedy. So again, there were some parts maybe where it just didn't make me laugh. But again, that didn't really deter me from enjoying this film. All right, I think this is a great segue kind of to move into my favorite performance of the film. This is definitely going to be a tough one. Again, like I mentioned, the chemistry between Madison and Gary in this film was really, really well done. And so I feel like it's between my favorite performances of Glenn Powell and Adria Arjona. It's going to be either one of those two. If I had to choose one right now, I have to go with Glenn Powell. I think he just had much more to do because he actually had to pretend to be different types of hitman. I thought he was going to have to, play maybe the same type of hitman over and over again, maybe change how he looked. But no, he would change his accent. He would change the way that he would deliver certain lines. Sometimes he would be very serious. Sometimes he would be very energetic and like have fun with the client that he was basically pretending to be a hitman for. So he just, again, had to do a lot more with his character. And so I got to give it to Glenn Powell. Again, shout out to Adria Arjona. She did great. This is really one of the first roles that I've seen her in. And I can't wait to see more of her because I think she did a really great job as Madison. She acted as this wife that wants to get divorced and she wants to kind of get away from her husband. But as the story rolls around, you start seeing her true identity, her true self. And again, just goes into a way that I didn't expect. But again, I'm not going to spoil too much of it, guys. I want you guys to experience this movie on your own as well. But other than that, I'm going to choose Glenn Powell as my favorite performance. Okay, and now I'm going to segue into my favorite moment of the movie. And this one was actually very easy for me. It's actually a scene between Gary and Madison. What happens in the film, just to kind of give a little bit of background, Madison ends up getting and falling in love with Gary. However, she meets Gary as Ron, basically the fake hitman that he made up. And so Madison thinks that, again, Ron is the real guy, when in reality, Gary just made him up. And so what they end up doing is that there's a point in the third act where they're being accused of murder, and they basically have to try to find a way to escape and get out of it. And so what they do is that they, you see Ron come in here, again, played as Gary, and then he ends up going into the house of Madison, and he has a phone, and he's in his notes app, and he basically writes down, hey, they're listening into our conversation. We have to act like if everything is normal. And they basically have a full-on conversation inside Madison's house, and they're just basically going through and having a fake conversation where they're yelling at each other, they're accusing each other of doing all this stuff, and again, just trying to prove to the New Orleans Police Department that neither one of them did the murder that occurred in this film. And so it was just, it was a great acting performance by both Adria and Glenn Powell. But on the second part, it was also hilarious because, again, they had to pretend like if they had an argument, like they hated each other, they were screaming at each other, and then at one point Madison has to basically tell him to get the heck out of her house, and it was just all this good stuff, but they kept looking at Ron's phone because he was writing down these notes of like, hey, okay, say this, say this, say this, like that, and they just kept going back and forth. It was just very funny. I'm pretty sure I didn't articulate it very well, but if you guys check out the movie, let me know what you think down below in the comments. Did you like that scene? That was, again, my favorite scene of just them pretending as if they were getting in a fight and arguing just so that they wouldn't get caught for a specific type of a murder. But again, that was my favorite moment. Let me know down below what was your favorite moment of this film. All right, guys, that's really my overall thoughts about Hitman. For me, I would actually, again, it's a straight to streaming movie. It did come out in theaters for a couple of weeks, but it just straight to Netflix. I would definitely recommend you guys go check out Hitman. Again, if you have a Netflix account, watch the movie. It is, again, to me, a great mix of romantic comedy and a little bit of drama, as well as a little bit of murder mystery. But again, it all blends itself really well, and at least to me, doesn't make it any kind of confusing, and it flows very well. So if you have an account with Netflix, please check out Hitman. All right, everybody, we have gotten to the last segment of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Now let's go ahead and decide whether Hitman is a timeless movie. Although I did really enjoy it, and I thought I had a great time watching this, I do have to say, after a couple days of kind of thinking through it, this movie is not timeless for me, at least in my opinion. It has potential. It definitely does. I can definitely see myself rewatching this, especially if I kind of bump this into more of like that romantic comedy type of genre. It definitely is up there. But again, I think to me, I got out of it what I needed to when I watched the first time. I really, again, enjoyed the conversations about identity, the explanations of how people can change and become individuals that they want to, depending on certain traits. But really, after watching it that one time, there was nothing that really popped out to me that was like, hey, I can't wait to rewatch this, or I can't wait to hear this joke again. So again, just for that kind of reason, to me, in my personal opinion, it's not timeless, and it's not in my top movies that I can like, hey, I want to rewatch this over and over again. But it was still a fun and awesome time to watch. It's not even a long movie as well. I think it barely hits 2 hours, maybe even less. But it's still an enjoyable experience. So again, I still recommend it, but not a film that I will rewatch over and over again every year. But again, those are my opinions, guys. Definitely want to hear from you. What are your thoughts of Hitman? Have you had a chance to check it out on Netflix? If you have, let me know down below in the comments what your thoughts are on this movie. Definitely want to interact with you guys and get your thoughts on the different scenes and the different, things that Glenn Powell ended up doing to become a hitman. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me on another movie discussion. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 73 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we cover the new film from Pixar. It is Inside Out 2. All right, guys, thank you so much and have a great rest of your week.